Bear doesn't look threatening. He has this kind of like innocent face. He feels awkward and lonely and almost a little bit sweet. And I genuinely think that's why the internet exploded into arguments over him. Because if he looked like a stereotypical douchebag or villain, there wouldn't even be a debate. But somehow this movie managed to split the audience in half. Hey guys, I'm Frizzy, I make art, and I have way too many opinions about fictional people. So if that sounds like something that you would be interested in and you want to see how this illustration turns out, then stick around. You know that guy who's so obsessed with his coworker that he ends up using a wish to replace her soul with a demonic obsessed version of herself so he can live out his fantasy version of romance and somehow ends up getting all of his friends and himself killed in the process? Well, I drew him. Today, we are talking about Bear from Obsession. Quick spoiler warning, we are going to be talking about major movie events, plot points, and details about Bear's character. So if you haven't seen Obsession yet and would prefer to experience his questionable decisions firsthand, then this is your chance to bounce. If you didn't enjoy this movie, which honestly, let's face it, you probably didn't. I mean, who can enjoy a horror as terrifying as this one? I mean, maybe you appreciated its complex characters, emotional details, and surprisingly solid story, but let's be honest, even if you liked it, there's no way your Apple Watch didn't think you were exercising the whole time. Especially during that one jump scene. I don't know. The movie was directed by a 26-year-old Curry Barker, an internet comedian who created the YouTube channel That's a Bad Idea. He got the idea for the movie after watching a Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons featuring a cursed monkey paw, and he wrote the script while working at a coffee shop. People have been comparing the success of Obsession and The Backrooms because both are indie films created by young filmmakers who managed to compete with much larger productions. And honestly, if you thought The Backrooms, making a movie with $10 million was impressive, Obsession was made for only $750,000 and filmed in just 20 days. Meanwhile, Hollywood be spending hundreds of millions of dollars making things. To be honest, I know nothing about what it actually takes to create a movie, but it's not subjective to say that working off that small of a budget and grossing over $334 million is impressive. The actors did such an amazing job, with every character being portrayed with such realism. It really felt as if you were in their friend group. Indy Navarrete, who played Nikki, cited Mia Goth actually as one of her inspirations, which honestly makes a lot of sense. Her performance reminded me a lot of Pearl, like all of the creepy smiling and the uncanny emotion. Indy even said she was inspired by Mia's human first, crazy second style. She said she wanted to portray her character's emotions as real, but really extreme, so that the viewer could almost relate, which is exactly what the audience did. Before I saw the movie, I actually planned on drawing Nikki. I had references picked out, I had different ideas, but after watching the movie, I realized we honestly barely know her. We almost never get to see the real Nikki, and the short bit of time we do is through Bear's twisted experience and perspective. And I think that's important because the movie isn't really about Nikki. It's about Bear. But more than that, there is so much to talk about with him. The actor for Bear, Michael Johnson, apparently didn't even audition for the role. His rep sent him the script, he liked it, and the rest was history. And honestly, they picked the perfect guy because Bear doesn't look threatening. He has this kind of like innocent face. He feels awkward and lonely and almost a little bit sweet. And I genuinely think that's why the internet exploded into arguments over him. Because if he looked like a stereotypical douchebag or villain, there wouldn't even be a debate. But somehow this movie managed to split the audience in half. Half the internet walked away saying, "Ah, what an unfortunate thing to happen to a lonely guy." And the other half said, no, he's terrifying. Personally, I think both sides are seeing something real because I don't think Bear is necessarily evil in his core, but I do think he's incredibly selfish in a way that I think many women can actually relate to. Sure, he happened to trip and fall in one of the most messed up situations there is, but the way he handled it is what truly is the most terrifying part of the movie. I mean, I walked out of the theater side-eyeing every man I passed while Toy Story was happily playing in the theater next door. It kind of felt like an emotional whiplash, which honestly raises an important question. Why do we willingly pay money to psychologically torment ourselves with horror movies? No, seriously, we buy a ticket, voluntarily spike our cortisols for 2 hours, and then drive home checking the back seat every 5 seconds. It looks really bad at first. It always looks really, really messy at first. And it's important as an artist for you to kind of push through this, because this is where everybody gets stuck, where they place the color down and then they give up and they think, okay, I'm not a good artist or I didn't do a good job. But if you just keep pushing through and little by little is what makes it look like the piece. I think a lot of people, a lot of artists don't do it this way. They're more methodical. They make sure that every brush stroke is where the color is supposed to be. I am not like that at all. I make mistakes, I fix the mistakes, I make mistakes, I fix the mistakes, and that's how I get to the point of where I want to be. Before we dive into Bear, we need to talk about the 4 main characters. We know there's Nikki and Bear, but there's also Sarah and Ian, who are just as important to the story. All 4 of them work together at a video store. And when we first meet Bear, he's actually practicing asking Nikki out with a waitress at a diner while Ian critiques him from the sidelines. Ian immediately tells him it's way too much, which is kind of true. Also, this scene plays an important role in a theory later on, so I want you to keep Ian's response in the back of your mind. Then we get one of the saddest scenes in the movie. Bear comes home to find his cat, Sandy, dead after getting into medication that Bear accidentally left out. R.I.P. Sandy. And something I noticed immediately, which might have been easy to miss, is that Bear never really blames himself. He blames the cat. But if you really think about it, cats can't open child-safe pill bottles. I can't even open those, which sounds like a tiny detail, but I think it's huge. Because throughout the entire movie, Bear treats tragedy like something that happens to him rather than something he helped create. And of course he's devastated and plans on canceling trivia night, but the second Nikki calls and tells him she just put in her 2 weeks, suddenly he's ready to go. We quickly get to see how head over heels he is with her. Even in the middle of grieving his cat, his world is just immediately snapping back into motion when it involves her. Trivia night is the first time we see all 4 friends together. And the first time I watched the movie, Sarah almost kind of disappears into the background. But thinking it over, she's actually the only person Bear truly opens up to. She's the one he actually talks to about his cat. She's the one who listens, and she's the one who emotionally supports him that night. And yet his attention keeps drifting back to Nikki, which makes me wonder, was Bear even looking for a connection in the first place? By the way, I have to give credit to the sound design here because it does something really clever. Whenever Bear is around Nikki, the music becomes kind of like a sweet, uplifting, romantic sound. Everything suddenly feels like we're watching it through his eyes, which is almost like a rom-com. But I think that's the trick, because we're hearing the world the way Bear hears it, and everybody else is just trapped in a horror movie while he's just living this rom-com at first. Now, eventually Bear gets the opportunity to drive Nikki home, and the entire car ride you can tell he's trying to work up the courage to ask her out. He even bought her a gift. But the whole conversation gives you the sense that Nikki either sees him as just a friend, or at the very least isn't nearly as consumed by the possibility of a relationship as Bear is. And the funny thing is, we never actually find out how she feels, because when Nikki practically asks him point blank, like, do you like me? Bear still cannot bring himself to tell her the truth. Side note, she does actually mention that Sarah might have feelings for him, and I feel like I'm going to say that a lot, but keep that detail in the back of your mind, because we've definitely got things to talk about with Sarah. Now, after Nikki goes inside, Bear sits in the car frustrated. He unwraps the gift that he was originally going to give to her, a one-wish willow. Apparently, you're supposed to split the branch in half and make one wish, and in the heat of the moment, that's exactly what he does. He kind of does it ironically, but he wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone else in the whole world, which, first of all, that is a crazy wish. Not, I don't know, I wish my cat was still alive. Like, he literally was just breaking down about it like an hour ago. He could have even just said, I wish I had the courage to tell her how I feel. No, he says, I wish she loved me more than anyone in the world. After he does this, he immediately sees her back outside staring at him. She comes back to the car with a completely different mindset. But more than that, she's just different. She brushes it off by saying she's drunk and that her dad is dying, but even on a first watch basis, you can tell this isn't the same person. And what's so unsettling about the movie is that it doesn't turn her into some like over-the-top demon. Instead, it's raw emotion, and it gives us these brief moments where the real Nikki seems to resurface. She'll suddenly look confused and like terrified, absolutely shocked by where she is. And every single time it happens, it catches you off guard, but more importantly, you just become even more convinced that Bear isn't talking to the real Nikki. And I think early on it becomes clear to Bear that underneath all this erratic behavior and unsettling mood, the real Nikki is still somewhere in there and she is suffering. The morning after, Bear and Nikki head to work together. And when Bear finally gets a moment alone with Ian, he admits that Nikki has been acting really strange, almost like something is seriously wrong. But what's interesting is that even while he's explaining it, Bear keeps defending her. He tells Ian that maybe she's acting this way because her dad is dying. Except Ian immediately points out that Nikki doesn't even talk to her dad anymore. So Bear instantly moves the goalpost. Well, I guess it probably still hurts her. And I think that's our first real glimpse into Bear's denial. Every time reality presents him with evidence that something is wrong, he finds another explanation that lets him keep believing everything is okay. Meanwhile, Ian and Bear are talking. Nikki is just staring at them menacingly. After work, Nikki actually leaves with Ian, and for a moment, it almost feels like whatever happened the night before is over. But then Bear gets home and there's Nikki standing at his front door. From this point on, Bear is never really alone again. Nikki comes inside, they confess their love for each other, and she never leaves again. At first, everything feels perfect. We get this montage of them cooking together, laughing together, and living what looks like Bear's dream relationship. But then Ian calls. He tells Bear that something is seriously wrong with Nikki and that her dad isn't actually sick, and none of her story is adding up. I absolutely love, I know I said this before, but I love the sound design during this scene because you can hear Bear's fantasy starting to crack. For just a moment, reality just punches through. You can almost feel his stomach drop just by listening to the music. Deep down, he already knew. He knows this isn't normal. He knows this isn't really Nikki. He just doesn't want it to be true. And when Bear goes back to the table, he tries confronting her, but Nikki immediately escalates the situation until he backs down. And that's the pattern that defines the rest of the movie. Bear desperately wants life to go back to feeling normal, so instead of confronting the problem, he accommodates it. Nikki's behavior only becomes more disturbing. She builds a memorial for his dead cat. She cooks the cat and packs it into his lunch. She duct tapes the front door shut so he can't leave. She watches him sleep from the corner of the room sometimes. And I also want to give another shout out to the filmmakers because this is where the lighting starts doing a lot of heavy lifting. Once Nikki becomes possessed or whatever exactly happens to her, she almost always is filmed in like a shadow. It's almost like her presence repels the light around her. For a movie made on such a small budget, details like the lighting and sound design do so much of the storytelling. And it worked. She's terrifying. But what's even worse is what Bear does, or maybe what he doesn't do. Outside of that first conversation with Ian, Bear never really tells anyone what's happening. He never asks for help. He never tells Sarah. He never goes to the police. He never leaves. His biggest act of resistance is basically just saying to Nikki, okay, no more crazy stuff, no more crazy stuff. That's basically all he tries to make things better. To us, the audience, the answer seems pretty obvious, like figure out how to undo the wish, maybe get rid of her or run, or I don't know, maybe just ask for help, reach out to a friend at least. But Bear doesn't, because even after everything that's happened, he's still just clinging on to this fantasy. The only real action he takes eventually, honestly, way too late in the movie, is he calls the number on the One Wish Willow box. And even then, when it seems like he might actually have the chance to undo everything, he hesitates. Because if he lets go of the wish, he has to let go of the life he's been dreaming about. And that's why I think his denial is where this story really, really gets ugly. While this is all going down, the one spark of problem solving we see Bear do is call the number on the back of the One Wish Willow box. This is my absolute favorite scene of the movie. It's funny, strange, and also terrifying. I think it's like the scene that represents the obsession movie. However, during that phone call, Bear learns that the only way to end the wish is for him to die. Then the person on the other end asks, "Do you want to talk to her?" Before Bear can even respond, we hear Nikki screaming through the phone. Not the possessed version we've been watching, the real Nikki. Terrified, trapped. Bear gets scared and he hangs up. Then we get this long, quiet shot of him just staring into space, silently processing what he just heard. The first time I watched the movie, I assumed he was weighing the cost. Like, if he really actually loved Nikki, maybe he was trying to come to terms with the fact that he's gonna need to sacrifice himself to save her. But after finishing the movie and looking back on the scene, I don't think that's what he's going through in his head at all. I don't think Bear was mourning the idea of losing his life. I think he was mourning the idea that he couldn't make Nikki normal and everything isn't just gonna be okay. If I am correct, that is an important distinction. And with Bear's eyes, I really wanted them to look kind of like he was looking through you and not at you. I don't know if I successfully did that, but I did try. But it was interesting to add all of those different colors into the facial features. It was, like I said, a generally easy painting to do. I have done paintings in the past or illustrations in the past where it was really hard to do and really hard to work with. Bear is more of a younger guy and he doesn't have as many like different things that I had to work on, so it took me a lot less time to paint. But it's something that I think a lot of people just look over is, oh, a portrait's just gonna be about the same amount of time for each portrait, but everyone is different. Everyone has different facial features. Somebody who has sort of a younger, more youthful look and more simple features is gonna be harder than somebody who has more, dark circles and crevices and wrinkles in their face. As the days go on, Nikki's behavior just keeps escalating. Some of her outbursts are rooted in emotions that feel surprisingly relatable. They're just turned up to an 11. And others are so completely uncanny that they send a shiver down your spine. I think that's part of what makes her character so unique and beloved by horror film lovers. One minute the theater is laughing because we've all either been that dramatic or we know someone who has, and the next minute everyone realizes something is deeply, deeply wrong. It's the constant back and forth between comedy and horror that keeps you on edge because you never know which version of Nikki you're about to get. Eventually, we get to the party scene. I'm not going to break down every single moment that happened here because we'd be here all day, but there are two things I think are really important. The first happens during a party game. Bear is told to kiss the person on his left, which happens to be Sarah. Nikki immediately stops it, not by saying she's uncomfortable, not by asking Bear not to. She physically drags Sarah's chair back and out of the way to take her place. It's possessive, it's awkward, and everyone reluctantly just kind of goes with it. For most of the night, Nikki bounces back and forth between acting almost normal-ish and completely derailing the room. She silences conversations, makes everyone uncomfortable, and keeps crossing social boundaries. But because Bear hasn't told anyone what's been happening, everyone just assumes she's just having a really hard time. That illusion completely shatters when the real Nikki suddenly breaks through. She screams, "It's not me! It's not me!" and then begins smashing a broken bottle into her own face, trying to stop whatever has taken control of her. And this is the moment where Bear's reaction really stood out to me. He doesn't immediately run to help her. He doesn't jump into action. Instead, he dissociates. But not because he's worried, but because he is disappointed. And the little respect the friend group had for them was being shattered. He gets that same distant 1,000-yard stare we've seen every other time Nikki's behavior spirals out of control. People around him are yelling for him to do something, and in my opinion, it takes him way too long to snap out of it, because regardless of what Bear is feeling in that moment, maybe embarrassment, disappointment, hopelessness, the woman he claims to love is actively hurting herself physically. His first instinct should have been concern for her safety. Just another example of Bear caring about preserving the illusion than confronting the reality. Later that night, things somehow get even worse. Sarah texts Bear in the middle of the night asking him to meet her. Bear tries telling Sarah no, but she refuses to take no for an answer. She tells him that if he won't come to her, she will come to him. Wow. Yeah. So Bear quietly slips out of bed, and then one of the most saddest, chilling moments in the entire movie happens. Right as he's about to leave, we hear Nikki whisper. For a split second, you think she's caught him sneaking out, but instead she quietly says, "Be quiet, she's sleeping. I'm the real Nikki." She begs Bear to put her out of her misery, to kill her. Think about that for a second. The woman Bear claims to love is telling him she's trapped inside of her own body. She's terrified, she's suffering, she's begging him to end it. And Bear's first response isn't to console her, it isn't panic, it isn't, "Oh my gosh, how do I save you? What do we do?" He immediately denies what she's saying. He insists there isn't any other Nikki. Then, almost as if he's offended, he asks if being with him is really so awful that she'd rather die. That moment completely sealed the deal for me, because even in the moment that is entirely about Nikki's suffering, he somehow makes it about himself and then just leaves. Just like he hung up the phone after hearing the real Nikki screaming, just like every other moment where reality threatened his fantasy, he walks away. He leaves the real Nikki alone in her suffering, suffering that exists because of a wish he made. And instead of facing what he's done, he chooses once again to retreat back into the version of reality that's easier for him to live with. Imagine being Nikki, trapped in your own body, suffering, and every time you reach the surface for help, all you get is Bear's blank stare and silence. For me, this is the moment where the movie stops becoming Bear and Nikki versus the wish and starts feeling more like Nikki versus Bear. And after this scene, I can't help but say everything that comes after is his fault. So Bear leaves and meets up with Sarah. Now, remember when I told you to keep everything I said about Sarah in the back of your mind? Okay, by this point in the movie, we know a few really important things. Before Bear ever made the wish, Sarah had already admitted to Nikki that she had feelings for him. She's also the only person who repeatedly checks in on Bear's well-being. At one point, she even tells him she's worried that Nikki is taking advantage of him, which is really interesting because Ian says the exact opposite. Ian tells Bear that he thinks Bear is taking advantage of Nikki. So before anything supernatural even happens, the movie is already asking us, who's actually seeing the situation clearly? Sarah asks Bear to meet her because she wants to open her final college acceptance letter with him. Think about that. Out of everyone she could have shared that moment with, she chose Bear. She mentions a few things here, including that Nikki and Ian have been seeing each other on and off for a while. But outside of that juicy piece of information, the whole scene feels incredibly intimate. She's excited, she's vulnerable, and honestly, she's flirting pretty hard. Earlier in the movie, we see her resting her head on his shoulder and leaning into him, but here she's finally more direct. She tells him he deserves someone different. Then she says, "I was on your left," referring to the party game where Bear was supposed to kiss her before Nikki physically shoved her out of the way. I have mixed feelings about this scene. On one hand, if you look at it from Sarah's perspective, it's understandable why she'd finally say something. She had already opened up to Nikki about her feelings for Bear. And then, almost overnight, Nikki and Bear suddenly become a couple without any explanation. I'm sure there were a lot of hurt feelings there, but Sarah just witnessed her friend hurt herself badly. She doesn't text Nikki or ask to see her to make sure she is okay. Even if Bear's relationship happens to be with a demonically possessed version of Nikki, trying to make a move on him flirting is still crossing a line in my opinion. It honestly unlocked a lot of fear for me. I had to ask my boyfriend if he would flirt with another girl if I was possessed, and fed him his dead cat and smashed a glass bottle into my forehead at a party. I mean, if that happened, he better be tending to my gash on my demon forehead. On another hand, though, this scene is crucial to the plot, regardless of how I feel about Sarah, because it's a reminder to Bear and to us as the audience that this entire time he had another choice, one that wasn't built on a wish, one that might have actually been real. But sadly, before Bear can even process what she's saying, Nikki crashes through the car window. Or more accurately, whatever is inside Nikki crashes through the window. I'm not going to spend too much time on this murder itself because honestly, it's really brutal. But I will say I could definitely tell they swapped out Sarah for a dummy during a couple of shots. The way the body moved felt a little stiff. But then I remembered the movie had a $750,000 budget and I decided they earned a pass. Also, whoever came up with that twitching eye thing after her face was like gone, not there, congratulations, that image has officially burned into my brain. So, RIP Sandy and now Sarah. Immediately after Sarah is killed, Nikki runs over to comfort Bear. And I'm not gonna lie, I was gagged because the emotional whiplash is insane. She's basically like, it's okay. I mean, this is kind of your fault, but don't worry, sweetie. Now help me get rid of the body. And somehow it's just hilarious. The movie has this weird ability to make you laugh and feel deeply disturbed at exactly the same time, and I love it. After spending the entire night silently cleaning up the mess and once again staring off into space, processing everything that's happened, Bear finally decided to do something proactive. He goes back to the shop where he originally bought the One Wish Willow, and this is where I started asking myself something. Why now? Bear has known something was wrong for a long time. He's watched Nikki unravel. He's heard the real Nikki begging for help. He's ignored warning after warning, but it's only after someone dies. The situation was clearly dire before this, or maybe Bear finally reaches a point where the cost of maintaining the fantasy becomes greater than the comfort the fantasy gives him. Only then does he start looking for a way out. I also have to give the writers credits because even during the climax of the movie, they somehow keep the comedy alive. One of my favorite things about the movie is that everyone involved with the One Wish Willow acts like cursed wishes are the most normal thing in the world. Bear walks into the shop completely panicked and they basically say, yeah, that's how those wishes work. Meanwhile, every other person Bear talks to treats the whole thing like it's just complete nonsense. So Bear is constantly bouncing between two completely different realities. One where supernatural cursed wishes are apparently everyday customer service issues, and another where everyone thinks he's losing his mind. It creates this bizarre sense of isolation, and I don't think I have seen that in any other movie before. Bear eventually tracks Ian down, bringing him a fresh One Wish Willow branch, and the first thing Ian asks him is Nikki okay? I thought that was a really interesting detail because despite everything that's happened between them, Ian's first concern isn't the weird branch or why Bear looks like he just crawled out of a horror movie. His first concern is Nikki. It almost makes you wonder if Ian was one of the only people who genuinely cared about her well-being. Bear explains that because each person only gets one wish, he can't use another branch himself, so he needs Ian to make the wish for him. Specifically, he wants Ian to wish that everything goes back to normal before he made his original wish. It's actually kind of a solid plan, but the problem is Bear is terrible at communicating. He's covered in blood, he's visibly panicked, he's clearly been through something horrible, but instead of sitting Ian down and telling him, okay, this is everything that's happened, he just keeps insisting, trust me. And Ian has no idea Sarah is even dead. He doesn't know the real Nikki is trapped. He doesn't know Bear accidentally cursed everyone. He's missing almost every piece of information that would make Bear's request make sense. And honestly, can you really blame Ian for thinking his friend has completely lost it at this point? So instead, Ian cracks the branch and wishes for $1 billion, ironically. But money literally starts falling from the sky, of course, because in this world, one wish willows work. And Ian just stares there completely stunned. Meanwhile, Bear is horrified, all because Bear couldn't bring himself to tell someone the whole truth. So, what's Bear's next brilliant idea, you ask? Does he take a couple $100,000 from the money that's literally falling out of the sky, find a random stranger, hand them the exact wish written on a piece of paper, offer them the cash, and tell them to break the branch? No. Does he take it to his lovingly possessed, emotionally unstable, recently homicidal girlfriend? Yeah. That's the plan. And honestly, I don't know what answer he was expecting. You know what, Bear? You're right. I've done some thinking. This whole demonic obsession thing has been a little unhealthy. Let's call it quits. No, of course not. Instead, Bear finds Nikki wearing Sarah's clothes and her hair, standing beside Sarah's mutilated body with a gun pointed at her own head. This scene is brutal. I'm not even gonna pretend I watched all of it. My ears were plugged and my eyes were about 80% covered. So if I miss a detail, that's why. Then Ian starts pounding on the front door. He just watched $1 billion fall out of the sky, so he's finally realized Bear wasn't lying and now he needs some answers. When nobody opens the door, he kicks it in, and the second he walks inside, Nikki shoots him, and then almost immediately she turns the gun back on herself. Sarah is dead, Ian is dead, and Nikki is gone, and Bear is finally being forced to confront the reality he spent the whole movie trying to avoid. R.I.P. Sandy, Sarah, and Ian. Before we move on from Ian though, I actually want to rewind for a second, because after rewatching the movie, I realized that there were hints all along that Ian had feelings for Nikki too. Right from the opening diner scene, he's critiquing Bear's entire strategy for asking her out. When Bear says he might skip trivia night so he can spend time alone with Nikki, Ian immediately shuts it down because trivia is all he has to look forward to. He even tells Bear to call her Freaky Nikki, even though Bear points out that she hates that, which predictably goes terribly when he ends up deciding to do it for some reason. So was that sabotage? Later, Ian accidentally interrupts Bear right before he finally starts opening up to Nikki at the bar, and then later on, Ian confronts Bear and tells him he thinks Bear is taking advantage of Nikki while she's going through a difficult time. Looking back, I don't think Ian was just being an annoying friend. I think he genuinely did like Nikki, or at least maybe he wanted his casual relationship with Nikki to continue. So I wanted him to be in his uniform because I think there's something iconic to the movie Obsession of that striped green uniform button down. So I actually put him in the uniform when my original reference photo didn't have that, but I wanted to add it in, and so I was kind of creating it from another photo, and I had to essentially guess where that lighting was going to bounce off of, but I think I did an okay job. And background was just, I wanted it to look like an extension of him, and I wanted it to really work, which is why I picked that color that you see. And I always kind of blur out the background a little bit, and I'm not really a backgrounds person. There's some artists who really are good at making those sceneries. I just don't have a lot of experience in making landscapes and houses and buildings and things like that. I've always just painted portraits with blank or simple backgrounds, and so I just tend to gear towards that. And maybe I'll push myself out of my comfort zone in the future, but for now I did just kind of stick with what I typically do. So in the final moments of the movie, for the first time, we see mutual love. Bear and Nikki finally look at each other with exactly the same level of admiration. It's oddly beautiful, heartwarming even. But before we get there, let's talk about how we got here. After Ian is shot, Bear locks himself in the bathroom. He grabs the gun. This is the first time in the entire movie that Bear seriously attempts to end his own life to save Nikki. And you can tell he doesn't know what he's doing. He points the gun at his chest, then his mouth. He hesitates. He can't bring himself to pull the trigger. Instead, he reaches for the same pills that killed his cat Sandy. He dumps an absurd amount into his mouth, and there's something really sad about the look on his face after he does that. He's honestly terrified. He doesn't want to die, But it feels like for the first time, he finally understands that there isn't a happy ending waiting for him. Whether he's doing it out of guilt to stop anyone else from getting hurt, or because he realizes his own life is over, the movie never tells us. But whatever his motivation is, he panics. Almost immediately, he tries to throw the pills back up. And right before he can, he hears a snap. It was the willow branch. Nikki broke it. She made the exact same wish Bear made at the beginning of the movie. She wishes for Bear to love her more than anyone else in the world. And just like that, Bear changes. The same way Nikki changed after his wish. The look in his eyes completely shifts. He slowly walks out of the bathroom. The two of them stare at each other like they're the only people left in existence. For the first time in the entire movie, their love is completely mutual. And I think that's one of the cruelest ironies in the film. Bear never loved Nikki. And Nikki the real Nikki never loved Bear. When they do finally love each other, it isn't really Bear and Nikki. It's literally the curse staring at itself, or the entities possessing them. The real Bear and the real Nikki are trapped beneath the surface, just like Nikki had been the entire time. Satisfyingly enough, for one brief moment, Bear finally experiences what Nikki has been living through all along. But tragically for the entities that are enamored by each other at this point, the pills had already taken effect and Bear collapses. The possessed Nikki screams in absolute agony as the person she loves more than anything begins dying in front of her. She grabs the gun, ready to end her own life too, but just before she pulls the trigger, the curse is lifted with Bear dead and the real Nikki wakes up, and she's surrounded by the bodies of her friends. This movie was a trip. Honestly, it's one of a kind. I fear it's going to be a long time before I get another movie this good to react to. Something I keep coming back to is how much messier this friend group is than it first appears. Bear wanted a relationship with Nikki, Ian wanted a relationship with Nikki, Sarah wanted a relationship with Bear, and because of all of that, I don't think any of them were really seeing the situation for what it is. Everyone was so focused on what they wanted that Nikki ended up completely alone. Sarah's concern was always directed towards Bear. Ian's concern for Nikki was filtered through his feelings for her, and Bear, well, Bear's entire perspective revolved around the fantasy he created. I think that's one of the biggest tragedies in the movie, because the one person who needed someone to truly see her was the one person nobody was really looking at, and was let down by not only Bear, but all of her friends. I honestly feel so bad for Nikki. From the little bit we actually get to see of her, she seems like she's genuinely cared about her friends and the people around her. I know we don't get to know her very well, but it honestly feels like everyone let her down. And after everything happened, assuming she survives and remembers all of it, I can't imagine she'll ever have a normal life again. She's probably going to spend the rest of her life carrying unimaginable trauma. And depending on what the authorities believe happened, she may even spend the rest of her life in prison for something she never chose to do. One last thing, I actually think Bear's attempt to end his life at the end of the movie was selfish too. Now, I know that's probably going to be controversial, but hear me out. To me, it didn't feel like he was doing it for Nikki. It felt like he was doing it because he had finally reached the point where he couldn't live with the consequences of his own choices anymore. And in the end, Nikki was the one left to wake up surrounded by the bodies with her fingerprints all over everything. Even in his final decision, she was still just an afterthought. Yeah, this is the final result. I think it turned out pretty good. It's not my favorite, it's not my least favorite. I think that it turned out okay. Let me know what you guys think about this illustration and who you want me to do next. I can do other characters of this movie Obsession. I think, however, it's gonna be a little tricky because the movie was about Bear, so I think I might just move on to another movie. I've been thinking about maybe doing the movie Sinners or the movie Weapons, but let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I am new to making videos, so I really hope you guys like it. Let me know who you want me to do next. I really enjoyed doing this movie. Like I said, I don't think I am going to find such a good movie to review as this one. But if you liked this video, I do have another video on the movie Backrooms, which is also an incredible movie to break down as well. So if you like this one, go ahead and click on that one. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye. 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 I wish it didn't hurt anymore when I sat down to make long YouTube videos.